Part 27. Royal Highness Crown Prince meets with his mother concubine Wen, then first round battle. Father, why should I go to concubine Wen? I'm not going. Xia Dongming's angry shouts had already sounded in the courtyard, but after breaking in, the perverse and violent little prince didn't dare to make any excessive moves after all. And honestly saw Xia Linxuan before he got up and stood reluctantly. It's concubine Wen. Xia Linxuan glanced at him, but he didn't stop his hand on the fold, and said lightly, "It's nothing. This is the meaning of your mother's death wishes, and it is also the meaning of me." "I don't believe it," Xia Dongming yelled, his little face flushed. "The Queen Mother will not hand me over to that man. It's ridiculous." Xia Linxuan snorted coldly, finally put down the pen, looked up at his son, and said coldly, "Do you think your father is lying to you? Jokes. If I mean it, I will call you directly. Why do you need to use the name of your mother?" Xia Dongming was stunned, and said stupidly for a while, But how could the Queen Mother give me to him? There are so many concubines in the palace." He didn't wait to finish his speaking. He heard Xia Linxuan say lightly, "Oh? With so many concubines in the palace, who do you want to go to?" Xia Dongming's face was overjoyed, and he hurriedly said, "I want to go to." Speaking of this, he was stunned. And he couldn't say any more. The faces and sweet smiles of those concubines appeared in his mind, and he suddenly felt a little cold on his body. He turned his head angrily for a long time and said, "Urchin." Urchin didn't want to go anywhere, so Urchin lived in Tai Ning Palace. Xia Linxuan sighed. This little guy really deserves to be his son. How old he is. He almost understands the cruelty and bloodiness of the harem. He stood up, came to Xia Dongming, picked him up and pressed him into a chair and sat down. He said in a deep voice, "Do you want to be the king and hegemon in the Tai Ning Palace, and there will not even be anyone who will ban you in the future? Don't dream." "What? My father asked me to go to the Yunhai Palace. But he asked that person to ban me?" Xia Dongming was about to jump up again, and the next moment, he was pressed down by Xia Linxuan, and heard his father frown. "It's concubine Wen. I don't want to teach you a second time. Originally, I wanted you to move there after the queen was buried, but you are so unreasonable now. Just move it for me now." Then he stood up and said to the little eunuch who was waiting at the door, "Go back and pack up your things for the prince. And move to the Yunhai Palace before this evening, where your dwelling has already been packed." "Father." Xia Dongming was about to call, but seeing Xia Linxuan's serious face, he said solemnly, "Remember to me. Let you go to Yunhai Palace, not only to let Qiutai ban you, but also to ask him to raise you. He is a person that even I admire and respect very much. You kid will be polite to him in the future, and if you dare to spread wild in the Yunhai Palace, I will not be polite to you. You want him to nurture me? Why did he?" Xia Dongming made his father's words angry, and shouted like a little wolf, but saw Xia Linxuan smile leisurely. "Why? Just by virtue of his weak crown age. His talent can make the literati in Jiangnan and Zhongbei respect him. With his kindness and righteousness, gentleness and generous, not arrogant or discouraged, and tenacious as grass. If you can learn a thing or two from him, you will get one or two ways of benevolence in the future emperor's art. Isn't my father afraid that I, like him, will become as cowardly and incompetent as a sheep, and can only swallow my anger?" Xia Dongming is not convinced. That concubine Wen may indeed be full of talent, kindness and righteousness. But there is a fart? Wasn't he forced by his father to enter the palace as a concubine? You, cowardly and incompetent as a sheep? Eat humble pie? Xia Linxuan squinted at his son. Phew. How can you have the face to say that you are justified in shouting this kind of thing, and you are not sorry? Is it to laugh off the big teeth of the people in the palace? Father. Xia Dongming was so angry, and was about to argue again, when he saw Xia Linxuan waving his hand. Okay, okay. You stinky boy, hurry up and roll over to me. Listen, don't be wild, otherwise, I won't let you see your uncle in the future. At the mention of Pan Qingyun, Xia Dongming's eyes immediately lit up. Huh? Father, if your uncle goes on an expedition in the future, can you let your urchin go with him? Xia Linxuan glanced at him again, raised his head and snorted. Look at your performance. I've been very busy lately, you'd better understand something, don't make trouble for me, otherwise, You get the idea. Okay, urchin must learn to ride and shoot hard. Xia Dongming was excited. Forget it, just move over. Forgive that cowardly man and don't dare to really control himself. When the time comes, won't he let himself do anything in the Yunhai Palace? Yes, there is also that cowardly and unproductive guy like him. His name is Zhu Shanyan, right? Hey, he plays the piano quite well, and when the time comes, he lives in the Yunhai Palace, and if he can't sleep at night, he can pull him to his room to play the piano, and he can hear it whenever he wants. Xia Linxuan looked at his son's rolling eyes. Where did he not know that this kid didn't have any good ideas in his heart? But I'm not afraid, I have my own support for Qiutai, although this stinky boy is the prince, after all. He is not the emperor. There is nothing to coerce Qiutai, and then he will know what kind of person that concubine Wen is. While thinking about it, this unscrupulous father snickered in his heart like a fox, and then stood up and said, Since you agreed, go. I will accompany you to the Yunhai Palace first, and then pack up the things and stuff. Anyway, your personal eunuchs and grandmothers have to worry about. Father, are you going too? Xia Dongming was stupid. He had made up his mind to go over to give Pu Qiutai and Zhu Shanyan a dismount, so that they could know how powerful they were, and they would be obedient in the future. Who knew that his father would go with him, with his love for that man, let alone give others a dismissal? It would be good not to be united by his father and that man to give him a dismissal. Just as he was about to find a way to refuse, Xia Linxuan take his hand and leave. Xia Dongming had no choice but to follow, while still changing his mind in his heart, but no matter how witty he was, he couldn't stand his father's power. He had arrived at Yunhai Palace, and he hadn't come up with any good ideas yet. At this time, Pu Qiutai and the others had already received the letter, and they all greeted Xia Dongming in front of the gate of Yunhai Palace. Before they could kneel down, they were helped up by the powerful and domineering king, and heard him laugh and say, Qiutai, you should also know the prince, right? Since then, I and the deceased empress have handed him over to you. You must teach him with your heart, and teach a good emperor for my daimyo dynasty. Pu Qiutai said helplessly. The minister doesn't dare to promise anything, but I must do my best. Xia Linxuan nodded and smiled. As long as you are willing to do your best, I will rest assured. Remember, he is not only my son, but also your son, the child of you and me. Do you understand what I mean? Pu Qiutai nodded, but snorted coldly in his heart, and secretly said that I don't have such an unfilial son, and he almost kicked me to death when we met for the first time. However, he also knew that Xia Linxuan was insisting on tying himself to him, and now that the situation was stronger than others, what could he do except agree? Hearing that Xia Linxuan asked Xia Dongming to greet him, Pu Qiutai originally planned to stop him, but when he saw that kid was procrastinating, he understood what he had in mind. Thinking of this kid's majestic and hateful face when he bullied Zhu Shanyan's sister and brother in the past, he suddenly slowly straightened his waist, looked at Xia Dongming with a smile, and actually put on a posture to prepare to accept his gift. What's going on? Why didn't that damn man stop it? Shouldn't he have said something like, "No need to be polite," to his father? Why didn't he come to help me? Xia Dongming was bending over slowly, thinking in his heart, but there was no movement for a long time. But his father's voice came. What's the matter? What are you rubbing? Taking another look at Pu Qiutai, the little prince's nose was almost crooked, only to see the other party standing there upright, completely ready to be saluted. Anyway, the situation is stronger than people, so why not bow your head for the time being? Xia Dongming thought angrily, gritted his teeth, knelt down on one knee, and slowly called, "Meet concubine Wen," while howling in his heart. You wait for me, dare to accept the courtesy of this prince, and you will know the consequences in the future. I was about to stand up while howling in my heart, but I heard my father say in a calm voice, "You stinky boy did it on purpose, right? Didn't you hear what I said just now? From then on, concubine Wen is your mother, and when you meet your mother, you do this kind of ceremony? The sons only have a queen mother, not a concubine." Xia Dongming couldn't hold back any longer, and stood up with a rub, and before he could stand up straight, he felt that his knees were numb. It was his father who came out like electricity, and lightly tapped on his knees, and then knelt down on his knees again, and heard Xia Linxuan say in a deep voice, "Your mother is earnestly entrusting before her death, only by handing you over to concubine Wen to teach. Just by virtue of this, you should call him a concubine Wen. If you are so domineering today, if I am not here in the future, can the roof of Yunhai Palace be lifted by you?" Xia Dongming bit his lip and didn't speak, staring at Xia Linxuan stubbornly. Seeing that his father was about to get angry again, he listened to Pu Qiutai beside him and said, "Your Majesty, it's just a matter of the mother or something. The little prince is still young after all. The queen has just passed away, he feels uncomfortable, and he refuses to call his mother concubine. He also misses his mother, so filial piety. There is nothing wrong." Xia Dongming was stunned again. What happened to the secret road? This bastard just accepted my courtesy like a dog. Why is he so kind to speak for me now? I was puzzled in my heart, and after thinking about it, I realized that the secret way was yes. Everyone in the palace said that he was forced into the palace by his father. And he didn't want to be a concubine, so he was a man, but he was called his mother. How insulting is this? Naturally, he can't stand it, he. As soon as he thought of this, he suddenly became excited. Regardless of his father's obvious partiality for Pu Qiutai, he immediately knelt down and kowtowed 3 times, and shouted with a smile, "Concubine Wen." Then he explained, "Just a few words to you, I can afford to call you a concubine. From then on, I also ask my mother to teach this son well." These few voices of the mother concubine almost turned Pu Qiutai's face green. In his heart, he still didn't understand what the little prince had in mind. It's just that there's nothing to be done. Xia Linxuan next to him naturally knew better where the key to his son's change of attitude before and after was, smiled slightly, turned to Pu Qiutai and said, "How? This kid is smart enough, isn't he? It's just too slippery, and his temper is also short-tempered. You have to manage him well in the future, and if he is disobedient, you will show your majesty as a mother." Pu Qiutai's face darkened again, and he said stupidly, "Yes, the minister understands. The residence for the crown prince has been cleaned up. Is it going to be over now?" Xia Linxuan was just about to agree, but he saw Xia Dongming stand up and smile at Pu Qiutai. "Concubine Wen, you are not full of people in the Yunhai Palace, right? Since I'm moving here, shouldn't everyone here come and see this prince too?" Pu Qiutai let out a groan in his heart, and immediately reacted to what Xia Dongming was referring to. I didn't expect this little prince to be really difficult, and at this time, he hasn't forgotten Shanyan and Mingfang. I had a secret hatred in my heart, but I heard Xia Linxuan say lightly. What the prince said is right, since he came to Yunhai Palace, except for you, the mother concubine, that is, the master of the hall, others should naturally come to greet. Speaking of this, he looked at Pu Qiutai again and whispered, "This is not some kind of oppression, is Qiutai?" He said so, and Pu Qiutai was helpless. So he had to order someone to find Zhu Shanyan and Zhu Mingfang. After a while, the two children came out under the guidance of Furong, trembling and frightened like two quails. Pu Qiutai's heart ached, but he didn't dare to show it too obviously. The emperor next to him had already expressed his dissatisfaction with caring for his two children before. And if he still showed concern at this time, he was afraid that he would bring trouble to them. While thinking about it, he said calmly, "Shanyan, Mingfang, give a salute to His Royal Highness Crown Prince, and from then on, he will also live in the Yunhai Palace." Zhu Shanyan and Zhu Mingfang hurriedly knelt down to meet Xia Dongming. Although they were small, they were also sensible in their hearts. Even if they felt humiliated and fearful, they were not willing to embarrass Pu Qiutai. Their father said that they were from the dead country, and they were not even qualified to be ordinary people, and they should suffer what kind of suffering. But it was Uncle Pu who suffered innocently with them, not to protect the two of them. Uncle Pu would rather die than enter the palace to suffer this humiliation. Xia Dongming nodded. And in an instant, he had thousands of ideas to trick them, but his father was still in front of him, so he had no choice but to endure it. So, a group of people came to Xia Dongming's temporary residence. It was the best and largest side hall in the Yunhai Palace, which was originally called Kuiweiju. And now it has been renamed by Pu Qiutai and called Wise Mansion. Why is it called that? It's not good at all. Xia Dongming glanced at Pu Qiutai, and was going to find fault, but he heard the other party say indifferently, "Changing this name is with the consent of the emperor. I hope that His Royal Highness Crown Prince will be able to become the King of Wisdom in the future, and guide the country and the world." Then, Xia Dongming still had to be reasonable, but he couldn't even say such a thing. Pu Qiutai didn't leak, and his father agreed, so what else to say? Because I had to move in with a puff, I had to find fault with all the furnishings again. Xia Linxuan can see it. This kid is showing his thorns in front of him. But he can imagine what he will become after he leaves. However, he glanced at the quiet Pu Qiutai next to him. No matter how Xia Dongming picked, he always had a reason to deal with it. No matter what he thought in his heart, on the surface, he really looked like a stern and kind mother who was also very smart. So, I put aside the worries in my heart. I have my support in the secret way, and I am afraid that Qiutai will not be able to cure this lawless little demon star. At the moment of having lunch in the Yunhai Palace, Xia Dongming was going to call the Zhu family sisters and brothers to come over to cloth vegetables, but Pu Qiutai refused to back down. No matter how the Zhu family sisters and brothers are, they can't be humiliated as slaves. Xia Linxuan is still letting him be a concubine now, and this bit of face is to be given. Therefore, he solemnly said, "Although they are not my children, they are like my nephews and nieces, and they have no reason to come to cloth vegetables." Xia Linxuan didn't care about these things, and he had the heart to see how his son dealt with it. And sure enough, Xia Dongming stopped screaming. Therefore, after the three of them had eaten, Xia Linxuan went back to Imperial study. Here Xia Dongming saw his father leave, and jumped up from the chair when he landed, and said to Pu Qiutai, "I gave you some face in front of my father before, don't be ashamed of yourself with that. In the end, you are just a male concubine of my father. What is it? Good." He saw Pu Qiutai smile and nodded. The prince's words are exactly what I want. Of course, you look down on me. And I don't want to have a son like you. That being the case, from now on, His Highness only lives in the Yunhai Palace, and our well water does not interfere with the river water, okay? There is only one thing, in this palace. I am the lord of a palace. Even if you are the crown prince, you are my adopted son in name after all, and you can't tolerate your presumptuous miasma here. In this way, is your highness satisfied? You. Hello bold. You. What do you rely on? Xia Dongming was stunned at first. He never expected Pu Qiutai to be so tough. When he heard him say that he was not allowed to be presumptuous in the Yunhai Palace, the little prince couldn't help jumping up and shouting in anger. That's funny, but seeing that Pu Qiutai was still unfazed, he said indifferently, at the gate of the palace before, you kowtowed and called that mother concubine. Did you call for nothing? If I am nominally your mother, why should I not control you? Just take care of you. Do you dare to beat me or dare to scold me? When the emperor found out, you said, he punished you, an unfilial son. Or punish me, a useless male concubine who is angry and humiliated. You are so insidious, so despicable. Xia Dongming thought about it with Pu Qiutai's words, and only felt that the other party's sentence was reasonable. Where could he go if he was a child, smart and cunning? Just like Xia Linxuan thought that day, no matter how strong he was, he couldn't stand the other party's support from his father, because the more he thought about it, the more angry he became. He had always been rampant and domineering in this palace. Even if those concubines were afraid that they would hate themselves, they would have to smile 3 points and be respectful when they met. Where was this man so outspoken? If you know, it's good. Pu Qiutai got up from his seat, walked in front of him, bent down slightly, stared at his face with burning eyes, and said word by word, so, don't think that I was forced to enter the palace and have a humble status. Just think about bullying me and Mingfang Shanyan, and force me to be in a hurry. I will be more insidious and despicable than you imagined. After he finished speaking, he straightened up, looked at Xia Dongming and sneered, be content, at least you still know what kind of person I am. Better than those concubines who flatter you on the surface, but in their hearts wish you died. My mother concubine is enough for you. Okay, His Royal Highness Crown Prince has just moved here. Let's see if you want to get familiar with the accommodation? Or take a break? Or do you want to go out and find someone complain to? Feel free to do so. After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. As soon as he walked to the door, he heard Xia Dongming say coldly behind him, you forgot? My father sent me to you to teach me. And that's what you taught me. Pu Qiutai's body paused slightly, and said indifferently, yes, this is the first lesson I taught you. Everything should be done in moderation. Don't deceive people too much. As soon as the words fell, he stepped out of the threshold and walked to the backyard surrounded by the palace maids and eunuchs. Only Xia Dongming stood in the hall for a long time, and said to himself, how powerful is he? How can it be? If it's really so powerful, how could he be so embarrassed by his father? Even enter the palace as a concubine? When the words fell, he suddenly heard a laugh behind him. The prince asked really well. Why? Naturally. Because you are not the emperor, you have nothing to use to coerce the mother. Now you know it's amazing, right? Xia Dongming looked back, then frowned and said, aren't you the palace maid next to concubine Wen? What's it called? How is it here? Why didn't you go with your master just now? But what do you want to say to me? Liulu covered her lips and smiled. Yo, I can't see that His Royal Highness Crown Prince is not polite to mother in person, but there is still a little concern behind it. It can be seen that His Royal Highness is like a mirror in his heart, knowing who is good and who is bad in this palace, but you just refuse to say it. Just now. The maid was just cleaning up in the back, and when she came out, she happened to hear His Highness talking to himself. Your Royal Highness. The slave maid told you that Mother Concubine Wen is extremely smart, and he is by no means one of those pedantic nerds who read dead books. Don't look at him, who is very vocal about you today. But he is actually a good person in his bones, otherwise he would not have been forced to this point by the Emperor. It's just his temper, eat soft and not hard. If your Highness wants to get along with him, well, in fact, you don't need to be soft, just put away those majestic and domineering, show more childish nature. And make sure that Mother likes you. You? What nonsense are you talking about? Why should I please him? I wish he had ignored me. Majestic and domineering? I'm the Crown Prince. So I'm going to be domineering. What can you do to me? Liulu smiled. Okay, your Highness doesn't listen to the good words of the slave and maid, and the slave and maid can't help it. Anyway, His Royal Highness will live here in the future, and you will know that what the servant said is true when you grow up. When the words fell, she smiled and walked away, leaving Xia Dongming here again. Humph. I don't believe it. Can't I fight a little male concubine? Xia Dongming put down a cruel sentence, but after finishing speaking, he couldn't help but look behind him. But fortunately, this time, no palace maids around Pu Qiutai came out to listen.